Happy Friday. We've made it through the week. We've made it almost through February. I feel like February was non-existent. I don't know if everyone else feels the same. But thanks for joining us today. I have Megan here with me. We're going to be talking about fuel tax reporting, IFTA, whatever acronym you know it and love it as. That's kind of, what our topic is today. As people trickle in, I'll go ahead and do my little housekeeping. This will be recorded, so don't feel like you need to take notes throughout the webinar. A copy of it will be available on our LinkedIn, our website, and also will be sent to you direct to your email. We're going to go ahead and get started. Today's topic, from mileage to money, how bad data creates bad fuel tax reporting filing. So Megan, go ahead and take it away.
Hi, everybody. Good morning. So what is IFTA? So IFTA is the difference between what states have miles and what states have fuel and allocating the correct taxes to them. So all the states get the correct money. Determining if you need it is based off of the weight of your vehicle and how you're traveling. If you're traveling across state lines and you are over 26,001 pounds, you are deemed needing that as a permit to travel across state lines. To keep accurate reporting data, you need to ensure that you are documenting all of your fuel and your miles. With your miles, you should be documenting the states that it travels in, where you got fuel as well, odometer readings, and all the information on the vehicle. So what bad data gaps can cause issues between mileage tracking, fuel receipts, and the internal processes and tools that you're utilizing? So for our mileage tracking, some of the things that can cause issues are when we are missing trips or state lines are not being captured correctly, whether you are doing it on a manual process with paper or your ELD data has not captured things correctly. So if there is bad cell service and then that data does not upload correctly, you can end up with missing data, non-contiguous states, which can really skew that data that's captured. For our fuel receipts, we want to ensure that we are tracking all of the correct data. So when fuel receipts are not tracked properly, whether a driver puts the fuel from the wrong vehicle on there, say they use the wrong fuel card, that can really mess things up because now it could be saying that there is fuel in a state that that truck did not drive in. And if the unit number is not keyed in correctly, you really won't know unless you're reaching out and asking those drivers. Or if you have bulk fuel tanks and they're not reconciled correctly, you're not documenting what fuel went into what vehicle, it can be really hard to determine where it went and ensuring that those vehicles had correct MPGs. So with our internal processes is really what it comes down to and ensuring that the data is filed correctly. So if we are utilizing a ton of different platforms or not really utilizing a system and just saying, okay, here's my miles, here's my fuel, uploading it directly into IFTA, then we really won't know where those gaps are. Or if there's a lot of manual entry. You know, we like to say that we're perfect, but nobody's process really is. If you're manually entering things, you can easily hit the wrong number. Then when it comes to filing, it can create issues and cause audits. And then the auditor is going to find those errors that you may not have even realized that you did.
Yeah, when you're so honed in on, you're in the weeds of entering that data, it's super easy to kind of like gloss over and like fat finger something. So doing that manual process can really cause a lot of issues. Just to grow on that too, it's not just the process, but potentially the tools that you're utilizing as well, right?
Definitely. Having a tool that is going to find any of those errors for you is going to be the most beneficial system, because as much as we want to look through and see those errors, we are only human and we can definitely miss things that it are overly complicated. IFTA is not meant to be overly complicated, but a lot of people look at it and they just are not as well versed as sometimes they think they need to be. But IFTA is a really simple process when you have the right tool. And focusing on any outliers is going to be really beneficial, having a good tool to utilize. We want to ensure that all of those MPGs per vehicle are correct. We have all of the data that is there. And say we have a vehicle that drove in a state with a weight distance permit, but we didn't have a permit. Those are things that a system needs to show us so we can ensure that we are compliant with our fuel tax reporting.
Okay.
So why does that accurate data matter? So when we put poor data, incorrect data into IFTA and file, that can not only lead to us needing to correct returns, but when we correct those returns, we can get interest and penalties put onto those. And if we are continuously having to correct returns, it can really increase the chance of us being selected for an audit. And obviously, nobody wants an audit because then it can be found out all those errors that we may not have caught. Additionally, when we have errors with our data, it could cause errors with our additional permits and then cause audits there as well. And the goal is to file as accurately as possible so then we don't get audits triggered. We don't have to pay extra money.
So when, say for example, an individual does file, IFTA and they do find an error, what do you recommend they do at that point?
I definitely recommend ensuring that you have all the documentation of why you corrected an error. So in the case of an audit, we amend a return, we want to know and document exactly why we corrected it and how we corrected it. So that way, say an auditor comes back and says, okay, well, you amended this, now you didn't owe as much, we had to give you a credit. Why?
Mhm.
Because they definitely want their money. And if you can prove to them why you deserved that credit, they most likely will not look any further into the rest of that data.
Okay. Yeah, because this basically comes back to having a solid way to track and report. And even if for whatever you're utilizing, if you have an Excel spreadsheet that you've thrown, formulas into to kind of help, just making sure that you have a solid way to store that, track that, make sure that that communication between who is involved in that process, it's really firm within the company policy of how that's being handled to, help with like audits and stuff like that down the line.
Definitely.
Cool. So we talked a lot about the gaps, but how do we, plan for the future? How do we fix the potential gaps that we've identified today? So, I think that's kind of your next point, right?
Yeah, definitely. Because not only do we want to know how the it in not necessarily incorrect, but the bad data is being generated, but how we can improve that, how we can ensure that from now on we're filing accurately. So improving how we're getting the data, how we're documenting it, what tools we're utilizing, and when it may be time to change, and then also what errors or reports we can run to ensure that we are documenting and storing the correct information.
Cool.
So, how we're planning for the future is improving that data accuracy. So, ensuring that we have one system that all of that data is going into and it's being audited correctly. Ensuring that our telematics is working and performing correctly, that there's not devices getting unplugged or data's not coming into them how it should. When we have fuel on there, ensuring that the all the information is on there, that the vehicle's on there, the states are on there correctly, and you don't have a driver who hasn't turned something in, and now you have high MPG for a vehicle, or fuel went into the wrong vehicle, and ensuring that you're correcting all of those things and knowing when those things happen.
Yeah, I think you made, when you talked about the ELD and the fuel cards and, all these other systems that you could be pulling data from, making sure that those are working properly. That's another kind of like touch point, I think, when you go and reconcile your reports of like, hey, this vehicle that usually only travels 10,000 miles or whatever, right? And now it's showing that it's traveling 100,000 miles or, during that time period. I think that's kind of a trigger, right, for someone to look and see, what is the trickle down effect of um utilizing this technology that could actually potentially be harming you, more less often than, it does. But I think that, is a good trigger. You just bringing that up kind of made a aha moment in my head. So I'm
Definitely,
sure,
because
yeah.
a lot of your vehicles are going to be traveling along the same areas or running the same MPG month to month.
Hmm.
And if now you have a vehicle that has a completely different set of miles, unless you know for sure, I had a vehicle down, I ran that vehicle, to the ground
Hmm.
this month. You need to know and figure out what happened here because that's not normal. So some reports that we can run to really ensure that the data is getting there and it is correct is running the miles by the jurisdiction and by the vehicle. That will tell you and give you a breakdown of by vehicle how many miles and what states they went into, as well as running the same type of report for your fuel. And then you can compare those and determine if there's any outliers, data gaps with your MPG, ensuring that they are all a typical MPG for a heavyweight vehicle. There's no way that a heavy vehicle could get, a 17 MPG. So putting those reports together, running them is going to show you any of those errors, as well as if there's any missing mileage or like Emily was saying, a huge amount of mileage for a vehicle that there is no possible way they could have driven that many miles in a month. And then comparing, what data you filed this quarter or going to file this quarter versus what you filed last quarter. Because unless you are like a seasonal carrier, there really is not a lot of difference in from one quarter to another on where your fuel tax should be payment wise or mile wise. And I mean, really, it should be consistent unless there's some exception with your fleet. And that will really point out if there is something wrong. you know, when we talk about getting an audit, we want to ensure that we have all of the data that's needed when we get audited. Of course, that is the goal is to not be audited, but with so many new pop-ups of random audits being selected, we want to ensure that we are ready at any moment and not having to scrounge around for data to back what we filed.
Hmm.
So ensuring that we have all of our quarterly reports and what we utilize to file those reports. So whether it be a bulk receipt, a receipt that the driver gave you, or a report from your fuel vendor, we want to know that all of those receipts that say that fuel went into a truck, that truck also went into there because yes, it may be the same state, but maybe that truck didn't go there. And an auditor is going to look at those things. If a truck has a high MPG and it didn't travel along that route where that fuel was purchased, they'll know right then and there that something's not right. And when that auditor pulls it, they're just going to pull a section of vehicles. If they find a lot of errors, they can pull up to that 4 years. And the goal is to not have that happen. We want to ensure that we're keeping all the information on the vehicle, the odometer, the VIN, where it went, all the trip summaries. So it's giving them that popcorn detail report. So some things that we really want to look out for before we actually file are if there's any missing information on our fuel receipts or missing receipts in general, any mileage that didn't have a supporting trip data. If you are, say your telematics went down and now you have no data for that period because your drivers are not accustomed to doing a manual trip log. Now you have missing data, missing mileage, but you're reporting fuel for that time period. We want to find those issues or really high MPGs, low MPGs, as well as any issues with fuel being in a state that the vehicle didn't drive in. A lot of times when we just file with, a spreadsheet and say, okay, these are how many miles I had, this is how much fuel, as long as a truck in your fleet drove in that state, you're not going to catch the fact that maybe a vehicle that got fuel in, say, California, but it never drove in California. You're not going to catch that because you had other vehicles drive in California. We want to make sure that there's no manual overrides. The driver didn't manually correct things and fixing all of those data before we decide to file. So planning for the future of when we know it's time to make a change. If doing your IFTA takes hours upon hours or even days, cleaning up issues and taking too much time and it becoming a very routine process to fix errors. Creating a process in place in your system, in your company is really what is going to be a key thing and knowing when to do that. We want to have the goal of decreasing audit stress. So if it is continuously increasing because you're constantly having to fix issues and maybe the same issues, maybe it's the same driver that's causing those issues. Now we need to figure out what is a best practice and best way to make sure that we're filing correct data. A lot of times companies will say, okay, I've got a great process, but now as their operations scale, their fleet has grown larger, they continue those same processes, but may not realize how different it is and how much those auditing and cleanup is taking as their fleet grows. So one of our tools that we have is our fuel tax reporting module from within our system, GW Connect. It is going to point out any anomalies from within your data. So you're easily going to upload that data and it's going to tell you any anomalies with your mileage. If there are non-contiguous states, in this photo, we can see that California had miles, Texas had miles, and there is no way that it could have connected. So maybe you had a device that went down and nobody noticed until it stopped in Texas. It is so important that we utilize a tool that's going to show those errors. It will point out if there's any weight distance tax permits that you drove into, but you didn't have a permit. And if there is high MPGs, low MPGs, or fuel in a state that the truck didn't drive in, and easily generating those reports in real time so at any time what you're needing to file.
I love showing this screenshot from our field tax reporting module because I think it's just such a cool visual to be able to see that. Again, when you're when you're in the trenches, when you are trying to audit a giant, Excel spreadsheet, sometimes you just miss things. So having a visual where you can clearly see that, hey, we're missing some states in between. I don't think we have some autonomous trucks, but I don't think we have floating trucks quite yet. I don't think we've hit that part of technology. No, not yet.
I always like to tell this story when I talk with people about fuel tax reporting. When I first started at VLC and doing fuel tax reporting, I had a driver in California. They decided to buy a new truck. They took their device out, got in a plane, flew across the United States, and picked up a truck and drove it back. And I'm like looking at this map, and it easily pointed out and told me that error that, I mean, there is no way they drove from California to Kentucky with no miles in between. So it really helped me at a really quick glance say, there's no way. And then I could reach out and say, what's going on? And we found out, and we corrected that because that is not really something we should be doing.
That's funny. So he yeah. But no, that's a good possibility that could happen, I guess, but very rare, right? Usually it's the device went down or you keyed something wrong, right? So, awesome. Okay.
So some of the key takeaways from, what we talked about today is really evaluating your current processes and how you're filing your stuff, what tools you're utilizing to file and audit your data, whether your telematics is the best telematics for you, if your fuel vendor's the best, and ensuring that you're capturing all the data that's needed and doing those internal reviews for what systems, how you're doing it, how they're auditing it, and ensuring that when you file, it is accurate data so you're not at a higher risk of audit.
Cool. Um, well, thanks so much for walking us through that. I know, field tax reporting and IFTA, all the acronyms that we know and love, can be a little bit of a daunting topic for some people. So I think it's, a good topic that we finally have discussed on our webinar. We do have some time left over if anyone has any questions for Megan. In regards to field tax reporting or, anything really we talked about today. You can go ahead and throw that into the Q&A chat at the top of your screen if anyone has anything. But um, great. Let's see. I'll give a few seconds to see if anyone has any questions. We do have a IFTA kind of like free download on our website on the I'm for Trucks website specifically, that you can download and can kind of help, gather your documents as a first line of, trying to fix some things if you suspect that your IFTA protocol is just not, where it needs to be. That's a really good place to look and start with. We do have a question that said, just to confirm, 26,000 registered weight, correct?
So actually, anything over 26,000 pounds. So 26,000 pound vehicles, yes, they need to be on IRP, but they do not need to be on IFTA. So once they hit that 26,001 pounds is when then they need to start being reported to IFTA. I know it's kind of a weird
You
difference,
think
and I
it
don't
would
know
be
why.
the same? You
I
think
think it
that
would.
1 pound would she said GVW or registered. So unlit and laden weight or the GV or CV. Oh my God. GVW or CVW.
It is what you've registered it as. So if you're registering it at a lower weight because you don't ever plan to operate it at that weight, then it is not required. So if though you do register it, say at 80,000 pounds, it is required to be on IFTA if you're traveling across state lines.
So, and just to clarify, IRP is the apportioned registration to cross state lines. It's different than the permit to operate in the
Correct.
states, different states. Yeah.
Correct.
People like to use those interchangeably, I think is one of the big
Yes.
and like I said, all the acronyms, right?
Yeah.
IRP, IFTA, FTR, NCP, DOT, they can any letter of the alphabet that they can use.
Yeah,
They
exactly.
they make they make an acronym for it.
Different ones for the same thing sometimes too.
Yeah, exactly. Um, well, I don't see any other questions. I saw some pop up here and there, starting to type, but it keeps going away. So, um, there's there is one typing right now. Maybe we can get it out. Um, as we're kind of wrapping up and letting the final questions flow in. Like I said, I will be sending out a recording of the webinar. It also will be available on our YouTube, our LinkedIn, our website. And if you are interested in learning a little bit more about GWC, Gateway Connect, or IFTA, and just overall fleet management, it goes further than just IFTA. We can definitely set some time up with our consultants to kind of really understand your business and see, where that could fit. Um, is there a more efficient or automated method to calculate and analyze non-IFTA miles?
So for any miles that are driven in a vehicle that is registered on IFTA, all those miles have to be reported. So for vehicles that are not on IFTA, it's not necessarily needing to be tracked and analyzed. However, say I have a vehicle that is traveling for hire during a period of time, and then that driver then says, okay, well, I'm going to go grab lunch, and they drive miles. Those miles are still needing to be reported because they're still being driven on the roads that need to be maintained, and the states want their taxes that was purchased for that fuel. So any miles driven in a vehicle on IFTA have to be reported.
So even if they're in like a personal conveyance or something, status, those still have to be reported as IFTA mileage.
Correct.
Gotcha. Okay. That's a good question. Is there, so really just utilizing, a good system to track those miles is kind of like the best way to automate it.
Yes, definitely. We want to ensure that everything is tracked, and automating things is going to simplify that process, but knowing that some vehicles may not be traveling a lot on IFTA and only in state, still needing to be tracked. If we have vehicles that are state vehicles, however, but not needing to be on IFTA because they're only traveling in state, there's not really a reasoning to track them, but you could always track them within our system.
So follow up, it says, then what would be non-IFTA miles? Is that just basically the state vehicles that are in your fleet would be considered non-IFTA? Is
Yeah, correct.
okay.
So if essentially it's only vehicles that are not on IFTA, so would be non-IFTA miles. So you can always set up like get credits or reefer, like a reefer refund type of thing. Refunds for miles that are driven off-road, but essentially those miles still need to be reported on IFTA. Then you can just do additional steps to get credits back, essentially.
Okay, so the full mileage, regardless of the status the driver's in, if they're driven on a road, the miles have to be fully reported. However, they will not be fully paid on, is kind of like a conclusion on that.
So they will be fully paid on. It's just then
Okay,
you can apply for a credit and get money back for them.
gotcha. Okay, okay. Um, Awesome, thank you. Yeah, and if you have any follow-up questions, we can definitely set up like I said, we can set up some time to talk through your individual business, how you are operating, to really fully understand kind of, you know, what mileage you're running, how your fleet is running, what you're currently doing, because there may be some things that, unless we understand the full picture, it's kind of hard to give full advice or on. So definitely we'll get connected with our team for that. But it doesn't look like we have any other questions rolling in, so I want to thank everyone for their time today, and look forward to next month's webinar. I'm super excited for that. Stay safe, stay compliant, and keep driving success. Thank you, everyone.